if any part of the head, body, or feet is in the opponent's head, excluding the halfway line. And any part of the head, body, or feet is nearer to the opponent's goal line than both the ball and the second to last opponent. So essentially what this is telling us is they have to be in the opponent's half, and they also have to be, what has to be ahead is any part of the body that can score. So it means it's the head, it's the feet. So it really is excluding the hands. So the hands of all players, including the goalkeepers, are not considered when you're considering offside. Again, and now a player in an offside position at the moment the ball is played or touched by a teammate is only penalized on becoming involved in the act of play by, number one, interfering with play by playing or touching a ball passed by a teammate, interfering with an opponent, or gaining an advantage. So there's really three big criteria for determining whether or not we're going to penalize the player by being in the position. So there are three, but the last two, the interfering with an opponent and gaining the advantage, those are big package terms that we're going to kind of tease out a little bit in the next few slides. So the one thing I do want to say is it's not an offense to be in the offside position. We're looking for these three things for the person who's receiving the ball to determine whether or not we're going to call offside. So interfering with an opponent really means it's four different things. We're looking at preventing an opponent from playing or being able to play the ball by clearly obstructing the opponent's line of vision. It is challenging an opponent for the ball. It is clearly attempting to play a ball which is close when the action impacts on the opponent. And four, making an obvious action which clearly impacts on the ability of an opponent to play the ball. And now gaining an advantage, again, it's very, there's a lot.
Can we go back to that slide really quickly?
Yep.
We're moving through this stuff a little quickly. Does anybody have any questions on this slide in particular? The next one, Veronica, the interfering with an opponent. These four items in particular. Please, if you have a question, type it into the chat feature so we can answer it.
And I will say, I have another slide later in terms of interfering with an opponent, actually all of them. So for the FIFA considerations, and so I'm gonna give examples of all these different components. So if you don't have a question now, maybe later when we start going over the considerations, you can go ahead and type in your question.
So we have a question here. How liberal does one define action impacts an opponent? Perhaps this is for later.
Yeah, this one's one more for later.
And then we have another question. What exactly do you mean challenging an opponent? Two questions. What is challenging an opponent? Okay,
so in terms of how, I'll start with the first question regarding impacts the ability. Really, we're looking at the proximity to the ball that's being played. So the person who's receiving it, if they were in the offside position, and if they're preventing somebody or with their actions, they're trying to play the ball. So we'll have slides later to demonstrate it, and then we'll talk about it more in the considerations. So really, the big key is proximity to the play. And in terms of, what was the second question?
What does it mean when you say challenging an opponent for the ball?
And challenging for the ball, again, so now a ball is being played by a teammate, and now we have a player who is in the offside position, who is now, there could be any kind of contact between that person and a defender. So we're looking for contact and attempt to play a ball. All right, I'll move on to the next one again. So I'm gonna go through these fairly quickly. I'm gonna explain them a little bit more detail, provide more examples when I go through the considerations.
If I can pause for just a moment, Veronica, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just a reminder to folks, and if this is your first time, please do not provide your own interpretation of what we're talking about into the chat feature. We have a bad habit of colleagues of putting misinformation at times in the chat feature. So please only use the chat feature to ask questions. Please do not attempt to answer any questions, because at times we end up putting incorrect information in that somebody might walk away from. So please allow Veronica or myself to answer these questions. Do not provide any of your own insight into the chat feature. The chat is only to be used for asking questions. Thank you.
So I'll move on to the next slide. So now we have gaining an advantage by playing the ball or interfering with an opponent when it has, number one, rebounded or been deflected off the goalpost, crossbar, match official, or opponent, or we have deliberately saved by an opponent. So again, in the considerations, we'll describe a little bit more what these things can mean. So these are the two definitions that fall under gaining an advantage. Also, something to note regarding gaining an advantage is a player in an offside position receiving the ball from an opponent who deliberately plays the ball, with the exception of a deliberate save, is not considered to have gained an advantage. So now we know that part of gaining an advantage is we're going to be thinking about whether something is deliberate versus deflection. This is a big term and we'll go into it a little bit more. So in terms of gaining an advantage, the big things to know is a ball that is deflected off an opponent and they're in the offside position when they receive the ball, it's offside. If a ball is saved by an opponent and it's received by an opponent in an offside position, that's offside as well. But if a defender plays the ball deliberately, then the person who receives the ball who was in the offside position is not offside. So we kind of talked about there's these three components to offside, and within the offside law, there's all of these different sub-points that we need to remember. So how do we remember all these different things? So the nice thing is FIFA has these considerations regarding offside. So the first one we're looking at is really interfering with play. And it's touching the ball or trying to play the ball. So this is our classic offside situations where there's a player in offside position, ball sent, and then they start running towards it, and either they get to it or they're very close. The flag comes up, that's offside. This is our classic example. And then we have interfering with an opponent. So the first one is the line of vision. The classic example for this is really when a player takes a shot on goal, and now there's a player in the offside position in the line of sight of the goalkeeper. So that's what we're mainly talking about in this situation is, did they interfere with the goalkeeper's ability to see the ball? That's the line of vision. And second is challenging for the ball. So we talked about it before. There was a question about it. So what is challenging for the ball? Our example is really, we had a player in the offside position who there's a ball sent, and now they are going to make contact or do some sort of motion or movement to try to play that ball. But then there's also that element of a defender as well. So we have a defender and an attacker. But again, the attacker was in the offside position prior to that ball being kicked. So that's what we have, that's what we're looking for. The third one is the clear attempt to play with impact. Now, what we're looking for really is the player was in the offside position, and because of that position that they were in, how did they impact the play? How did they impact on the opponent's ability to play that ball? And the last one, again, it's just an action that has impact. It's not, so it differs from the prior one because the first one is there's an attempt to play a ball, and the second one is just an action that has an impact by being in the offside position. So again, these are really complex terminology, and then we'll go through some videos and hopefully they make it easier to comprehend it a little bit more. The third component is gaining an advantage. So we talked about that there was really two elements of it, but we can actually tease them out a little bit more. We mentioned a rebound. A rebound is off of a goal post. It can be off of a team official. It can be off of, an official, or it can be an opponent off the crossbar. It's a deflection. Did the person who was in the offside position, did he receive the ball that was deflected from an opponent? Is there a save? Did the ball, is there a player? Is there a shot on goal with a player? It could be a goalkeeper. It could be a defender that saves the ball. So if that player tries to stop the ball from entering the goal, and now it falls to the feet of somebody who was in the offside position, that's offside. And then the last one is then we have interfering with the opponent. But again, it's different from the previous one because now we're looking at interfering because of the previous three things. Was there a rebound, a deflection, or a save, and then they received the ball. Or they did some sort of interference. So that's what we're looking at. And lastly, it's deliberate. In this term, this time it's actually green because it actually means it's not offside. We have mentioned previously, if a player, a defender, deliberately plays the ball and plays the ball to a player in an offside position, it's not offside. So at this moment, I recommend that you take a picture of the screen because it kind of makes it very clear all the things that we need to be aware of regarding offside. So I'll give you guys a few seconds.
A couple of questions while we wait, Veronica. We had a question, what is the difference with interfering with play between touch and play?
They're both very, very similar, and touch is actually touching the ball. The ball is sent, and somebody in the offside position actually tries to touches the ball. Play can be when the ball is sent, and someone just runs towards the ball. So they haven't touched that ball yet, but because numerous times we see that there's only one player who's running towards that ball, and he or she's the only person who's going to play, is in a position to play it, we know that you might as well just put the flag up because they're going to be offside. They were offside before the ball was sent, and they're going to interfere, and they're actually going to touch.
Another thing to help with that one a little bit is to understand that anytime a player receives the ball that has been touched or played by one of their teammates when they're in the offside position means they can be offside. We don't want to confuse the idea of a deliberate play by an attacker versus a deliberate play by a defender. A defender, if the ball rebounds off of them oddly, you're still going to have the offensive player be offside. Whereas if the ball rebounds off an attacking player and goes to their teammate in an offside position, they will still be considered offside because it has touched them. Versus a defender, if it has, rebounded off of them somehow, or if it touches them somehow, but it's not a deliberate play, then that attacker would still be considered offside. We had another question here. What is the difference between deliberate and deflection?
Oh, that's a good one. So the big thing that we're looking at is we're looking at time and distance, whether and how close they are to each other. Really is if a defender is really close to a ball that's being played, and all of a sudden either the ball hits them, then we know that's it's going to be very reactive, and the ball continues to go forward. So that is going to be a deflection. But if we know that the person made a very proactive move, they took time to determine how they were going to play that ball, they made some sort of a motion to play that ball in a controlled manner, that's more of a deliberate play. So we're looking at really if something is proactive versus reactive, but then we're also considering the distance and the time. So we're not looking at the outcome of how the ball is played, we're looking at these other two components.
What about, we have a question here, what about handball, a deliberate illegal play?
I'm confused by what do you mean by handball in terms of
someone does a deliberate illegal play, a handball, does that somehow negate offside?
Yes, because now we're looking at, it's a foul. We're not looking at offside anymore.
Yeah, if you're going to have a handball, then it's just handball. It's not offside. Okay, I think that's it for the questions for now. Okay, we did have one more question, sorry. A defender attempts to head the ball back, but it skins the top of their head and continues on in favor of the attacking team. Is that deliberate because they deliberately attempted, or is it deflection because they failed to completely redirect the ball?
I think the big thing that you're going to be looking at is the proximity to the kicker. If there's a slight motion where they barely jump, I mean, you would consider, and it skims off their head, you might consider that more of a reaction. But if there's a lot of distance between where the kicker was and where the defender was, then you would consider that more deliberate because there was a motion to jump up and play the ball with the head.
Okay, and then one more question. For making an obvious action which clearly impacts on the ability of the opponent to play the ball, you mentioned that proximity is key. What ballpark proximity do you consider close enough typically? Is it 3 to 4 steps away, closer, farther?
I think the big thing is going to be really like the player's ability to play. I think the younger they are, as much distance is not going to matter. But if they're someone who's a little bit more professional, has a little bit more experience, maybe shorter distance is not going to matter. I think the big thing is going to be looking at the other opponent, the defenders, and see if you believe in any way that they were not able to play that ball. Whether was it physically because the player who was in offside position was in their way. So that's really what you're looking at. You're looking at that other opponent, that other defender, and whether or not they could actually play the ball. So you're looking at more of the outcome.
All right, and then one final question, then we can move on. A goalkeeper gets screened by 3 offensive players prior to a goal being scored. Is this offside, and how is play restarted?
Yes, we mentioned that before. It's the line of vision, but the big thing that you're going to be looking at is going to be where that kicker is, because if those 3 players who are in the offside position were to the right of the goal or to the left of the goal, and they weren't in the line of vision of the goalkeeper, then it's not going to make a difference. But if the big thing is just knowing that any of those 3 were standing directly in the line of sight of the goalkeeper, then we have interfering with the opponent.
And it's important to note, Ian, that those players have to be in an offside position. If there are 2 players closer to the goal line than those players, then they're in an onside position and there's nothing wrong with it. But if they are in an offside position and they screen the goalkeeper, then you would consider it offside. And anytime we have an offside infraction, the restart is an indirect free kick. Moving on, go ahead.
All right, moving on. So we're going to have a few examples. We have 6 videos that we're going to get through. And as you watch them, try to make a determination whether or not we have no offside, whether or not we have offside interfering with play, if we have offside interfering with an opponent, or if it's offside gaining an advantage. I will replay each video about 3 times, so just try to focus on whether or not what your decision is. I'm just skipping the last video screens with the VAR because it's not really necessary. We'll clean it again.
Ian, I would like to remind you, please, while you watch this, not to share your opinions in the chat feature because you're sharing incorrect information. So please stop sharing your opinions in the chat feature. All right, Veronica, if you would pause at the moment of truth on this next one, I think that'll help us. Yeah. Pause on there, pause.
All right. So this is the moment of truth. So when we start every single video, the first thing that we need to look at is determine where is the kick point. Where is the moment that the ball is being kicked? So as soon as we have that moment, that's when we take a snapshot and we try to determine do we have anybody standing in the offside position? So in this case, we have the ball is being sent over the top, and we actually have a defender on the far side who is, you can see that it's actually his foot that's keeping everybody on. So I like this video really because this is actually a classic example of teams trying to play an offside trap where the defenders are pushing up, and then we have the attackers moving in an opposite direction. So if we're not focused as a system of referees, we may miss this moment and incorrectly penalize this player for offside. Again, we mentioned earlier what the criteria is. And so again, looking at the defender's foot, in this case, tells us that that's our offside line, and it's not offside. All right, we'll move on to the next video. This is it's a really good one just for that reason. It's something that happens very often. It's really about maintaining focus. All right, moving on to video number 2. Did anybody have questions on the previous video?
We didn't have any, no.
Okay, perfect. So we'll start playing this one. All right, with this video, the first thing that we have to do is we have to figure out what the kick point is. We have a kick point here, which again, this is the moment that the ball is being kicked. This is when we take our snapshot and make a determination. Do we have anybody standing in the offside position? In this case, yes, we have one person in green who's standing in the offside position. So then what happened after the ball was played? That's when we make a determination on the outcome. The ball is played, the ball goes forward, and the player who was in the offside position runs and actually touches the ball and plays it. So in this case, we have offside interfering with play. He runs and ends up touching the ball. Any questions on this play? Next video.
We had a question. Why does the AR keep the flag down? It's possible, Donald, on this one, he's either missed it or because he's on VAR protocol at the World Cup, and for tight decisions, they keep the flag down until the play is over. Either way, when we do clip analysis, we like to focus less on what the referees in the game actually did and focus more on what we think we should do moving forward.
Yeah, and that's really what it was. It's really two answers, like just Matt said. And really, even when we were at FIFA events and we would watch video clips, it's not really to determine whether or not somebody got the decision correct or incorrect. It's really about what we can take away from the situation. It's how we can learn from the video.
So there was a question here. This scenario is particularly challenging for the AR to catch the offside. Is there any advice for assistant referees to get this right?
Yeah, I think what is challenging is that the ball is sent over a distance. And so that's when it comes down to positioning, making sure the AR is square with the field when they have their shoulders open so that they can catch the movement of the ball out of their peripheral vision. But at the same time, they're also listening for the ball. You're listening for that, the ball being kicked. So because sometimes if the assistant referee turns their head to look at the ball being played, and by the time they turn, they're going to miss it. So really, it's really about being square with the field and trying to listen for that contact. It's tough in an environment like this where it's really loud, but in a lot of the other environments where we're working at the youth level or amateur level, it's very easy to pick up the sounds. And those are the clues that help us in making those kind of decisions.
We had one more question. Can you use football field diagram lines as a reference point to deem a player offside?
Yes, but you have to make sure that they're completely straight. So, there's a lot of times where we are using the field markings to help us for alignment and also for looking at the players. But it's actually a very good use of your environment.
Okay.
All right, next video.
They've got another big match coming up next Saturday night against Sacramento Republic FC. And they owe that team a little bit of payback after Republic served them a 2-0 victory in California. And Parada will put the finishing touches on this one. Gallegos, rather, will put the finishing touches on this one.
Great to see the youngster in the right spot, and that was a great finish. He's calling, he's trying to call offsides?
I think he's calling offside. You're right.
Is he?
Yeah.
I don't think so. What?
No goal. They are going to call the offside flag, so return it to a 3-1 line.
Wow, where was the offside? Oh, he's saying obstruction.
We got a pretty dodgy video, Veronica. Did you maximize for video when you shared your screen?
We can actually just look at the replay. So let's look at the next one.
Okay.
We've already seen kind of the bigger picture. And so let's go ahead and just look at the replay, which kind of zooms in a little bit more. So this is the same video, but it's more zoomed in.
That's hard to see where it indeed was obstructed.
Yeah, it's pretty jumpy. Can you just pause it at the moment of truth for us?
Sure.
We're only seeing every half second or so, if that.
Sorry, let me try to get it back in here. All right. So this one's going to be kind of tricky, really, because we don't have that bigger zoomed out picture. We don't have the picture that's kind of has the view of the assistant referee, but just looking at this image alone, and it's tricky because some of these players are a little bit fuzzy, but as we mentioned before, when we first start analyzing these videos, the first thing we have to look at is the kick point. It's a little shaky, it's blurry here, but we know the ball is leaving the foot of the attacker. So that's the first part. That's back. Right here. Second of all, once we have our kick point, then we're looking at trying to make a determination is whether or not we have a player in the offside position. So in this case, we have this teammate of the kicker directly standing in front of the goal area. So it's hard to see all of the players, but we know that just for simplicity's sake, we're going to say that there's nobody else there. You can look, and someone previously mentioned, and it was actually a good question to bring up regarding the field markings, look at the player's feet. See where he is on that goal area line, and then look at the other defenders. Look at how much distance there is. So just looking at the field markings tells you that he's closer to the goal line, this player in the offside position, than the other defender. So it's actually a very good point, and we are using those as reference points. So that's number 2. And now we're looking at the outcome. We know that the ball was shot through, and at some point when this ball is being played, there's because of the position of the attacker, there's going to be a moment when the goalkeeper cannot see where that ball is being played. So this is now where we're thinking about the clear obstruction of the line of vision. So I'll play a little bit more. Do you see that? Right there. The other indicator that we have regarding the line of vision is the fact that this attacker here had to jump out of the way. His movement told him that he was in the path of the ball. So that movement again is now preventing the goalkeeper from knowing where exactly this ball is being played. He did guess the right direction, but there's a moment where he can't fully see where the ball is heading because of the defender. Because of that attacker in the offside position.
So we had a question here. If the shot goes to the right, then it may not be an offside offense?
That is correct. That is correct. But the big thing that we're looking at is the outcome. We're looking at the goalkeeper and trying to determine if the ball is kicked to the right, then now maybe the player's position may not have interfered or ever blocked the line of vision.
Great. That's it on the questions.
Any other questions? Yeah, so another good point is sometimes what if this attacker is further to the left of the post? If he's further to the left and he's never in the line of vision of the goalkeeper, again, just because he's in the offside position doesn't always mean that we penalize somebody. What we're really looking at is whether he's in the line of vision of the goalkeeper at the moment that the ball is played. So the final answer for this is interfering with an opponent because of the line of vision. Any other questions for this clip?
Nope, that's it.
Perfect.
Oh, we did have one. Does this require communication between the referee and the AR, since the AR probably couldn't tell?
That's a great question. I'm glad you mentioned that because it was in my notes to mention it. This 100% requires communication because the assistant referee's vantage point, it's very clear for them to know whether or not we have a player who's offside or not offside. However, it's hard for the assistant referee to determine whether or not they're in the vision, and that's really going to be the information needed from the referee. The referee should have a good view and to be able to determine whether or not he was in the line of vision of the goalkeeper. The referee's not going to know whether or not the player was offside or not offside. They only know what the outcome was and whether or not it was the line of vision. So the assistant referee and the referee need to have a conversation and both contribute the piece of information that they both have to arrive at a final outcome. So,
and Veronica, what is our mechanic for that at the grassroots level when we're not wearing communication devices?
No, you just put the flag up and call the referee over, or if there's a goal, just stand at the corner flag and then make sure that the referee comes over to have that discussion. So it's going to be those two things, but really it has to be a conversation. The referee goes over to the assistant referee to get that information.
Great, thank you.
So great questions. Let's move on to the next video.
Really levels that one. Might have been a vital interception. Like there are, because that could have been heavy. Deflected arrow. Really levels that one. Might have been a vital interception. Like there are, because that could have been heavy. Deflected arrow. Really levels that one. Might have been a flight interception. Clever art, because that could have been heading.
All right, with this play, again, we start at the kick point, and this is the ball is about to be kicked by this player right here. And so this is when we draw our snapshot or take a picture and make a determination. Do we have someone in the offside position? Yes. We have a teammate who is just a step up. Right? So then we determine that we have a player in offside position. So what's the next thing that we look at? The outcome. So as this ball is being played, we have a defender directly behind him, and both these players are within proximity, and it's very possible that they're making contact as the attacker tries to play this ball. So in this situation, this is actually a perfect example of challenging for the ball. Someone had a question earlier regarding the interpretations. This is your classic example of challenging for the ball. So that falls in line with, yes, this is offside because we have interfering with an opponent. Any questions regarding this video? But really, the key thing that we're looking at is proximity. We see the contact between the attacker and the defender, and it's contact from an attacker that was in an offside position. And now these two players are making contact to try to play a ball and both challenge for the ball.
Great. We had one question, but it was only about the AR's performance on this clip, so we're not going to answer that one. So I think we're good to move on.
Yeah, I mean, as Matt said earlier, we don't know what the instruction was for these guys, and we don't know whether they missed it or not, or whether it's VAR instruction to just keep the flag down on close decisions.
So we had another question here. If the ball had gone off the offensive player's head and not the defender's head, I assume we would leave the flag down?
No, we would still give the ball. It's still an offense. The action that happened there was we had an offside infraction.
Yeah, so Lori, I think the question here is the player in red is in an offside position. The reason that he is offside on this clip is because he has challenged his opponent for the ball, which means he would be guilty of interfering with an opponent. If he plays the ball, he's still offside, but he's guilty of interfering with play. So while it's still all offside, the different kind of offside would change based on whether or not he plays the ball or not. So either way, this player is in the offside position. It's just a matter of if he plays the ball, then it's yes, he participated in play. If he doesn't play the ball, he has still interfered with an opponent, so he's still offside. Either way, he's in an offside position, though. We had another question. Do you give offside here, or do you just give the goal kick?
Sometimes it's really a decision up to the referee. They can decide which of the two they want to go with. They can choose to just go with the offside or just go with the goal kick because the result is really the same. It's going to be a ball given to the defense that's going to be played up. If it's a goal kick, there might be a little bit more freedom to be able to move it a little bit more in that goal area versus offside should be retaken from the place of the infraction. So it's going to really come down to the referee making that decision.
So as an assistant referee, though, Veronica, would you still be obligated to put your flag up, or would you just keep your flag down?
It's still the assistant referee's obligation to put the flag up and provide the information to the referee. So as an assistant referee, I would put my flag up. Because what if you're not really sure who the ball went off of? What if it goes, like in this case, it went off of the defender, and so it would be unfair to restart with the corner kick. So you provide that information to the referee and you let the referee make that final decision.
We had one more question here. What if the ball was lobbed well over the two players' head and neither of them had a chance to play the ball, but there was contact?
Well, I mean, in that case, then you would think that there's really no interfering with the opponent because the ball never even went in that direction.
Yeah, so if the ball's not close to being playable and neither of those two players are involved in the play, then there would be no infraction because you do have to participate in the play somehow. And if the ball goes way over your head, there's no play for you to participate in.
Yeah, and in this play, the ball went directly in the direction of the two players who are challenging. So it's very clear that there's actually interfering with the opponent.
Okay, that's it on the questions for this one.
Good questions. Let's move on to the 5th video.
Beautifully set up, swing and a miss, and there's the uplife of the bar. Beautifully set up, swing and a miss, and there's the uplife of the bar. Down the back, beautifully set up, swing and a miss, and there's the uplife of the bar. Beautifully set up, swing and a miss, and there's the uplife of the bar. Down the back, beautifully set up, swing and a miss, and there's the uplife of the bar.
All right, I think we've seen it enough times. So again, we start with the kick point. In this case, it's the player in green who's in the middle. And at that moment, we're looking at do we have a player in the offside position? Well, if you look at this video, we actually have a teammate who's off the field. For offside purposes, anybody who's off the field is considered to be on the goal line. So yes, we do have a player in the offside position. So what is the outcome? Well, as this ball is played, it ends up being saved by the goalkeeper, and then it rebounds off the crossbar in a position where now player coming from an offside position, this player here in green actually runs onto the ball. So now what is it that we have? As we mentioned before, our different considerations. We have the rebound. We have a teammate who is in an offside position who runs back to play the ball. So all of these are the indicators that tell us that this is gaining an advantage. Any questions?
Yep, we had a question here. What if they are off the field but not behind the goal line? So off one of the touch lines instead of off the goal line.
If they're off one of the touch lines and they don't are in a proximity or even try to play the ball, then it wouldn't be gaining an advantage, because the big thing that we're looking at is, did that player who's in the offside position, who's off the field, did they gain an advantage? So say the ball, for whatever reason, rebounds off the crossbar and maybe lands over by the touchline. I mean, it's very hypothetical, but if that were to happen and they're on the far side and they gained an advantage because they were off before, at the moment that the ball is kicked, then we would put the flag up. But if they're very far and they don't get involved and they don't gain an advantage, then we keep the flag down.
So we had another question.
As we're looking at whether or not that person gained an advantage by being in the offside position prior to the ball being played by the teammate.
So we had another question. If a defender is behind the goal line, then the goalkeeper becomes the second to last opponent, correct?
If the defender, yes. Yeah, if you look at this scenario here, one of the defenders might be closer to the goal line than the actual goalkeeper. So our goalkeeper is actually our second to the line, or second to the last opponent. So that's our offside line right there.
And then so we had a question, what if the second to last opponent, the second to last defender, is also behind the goal line? What happens then? If you have two players off the field past the goal line.
So in that case, it's the same situation, that both those players are considered to be on the goal line. So again, because we have the goalkeeper couple yards maybe up, the attacker is still in the offside position because we have the goalkeeper as well, who actually becomes our second to last opponent, and that's our offside line right there. So yeah. Whether it's attacker or defender, we always use, if they're off the field behind the goal line, then we count it's the goal line to indicate where their position is.
Yeah, so Robert, to answer your question, anybody who's off the field, you assume they're on the goal line. So if both defenders have gone off the field behind the goal line, then the goal line is your offside line. During the game as an AR, when an offside infraction happens, do you tell the referee what kind of offside decision it is?
generally you don't, you really are just putting up the flag for offside. If there's communication and they ask for specific questions, maybe you can elaborate. You can say, gaining an advantage. You can say interfering with an opponent. You can say, there's different things that can be said, but it really is just going to depend on the communication between the assistant referee and the referee. Sometimes the assistant referees are proactive to inform the referee. If there's a player standing on an offside position, say it's a free kick, for example, and you possibly have a couple players standing in front of the goalkeeper, then usually the referee or the AR will tell the referee over the comms and say, hey, we have, give numbers, number 2 and number 3 are both for green standing in the offside position. So sometimes they preempt it just to make sure that the referee is ready to help and make a certain decision. But generally, I would say maybe 90% of the time, the ARs just put the flag up to indicate offside, and then they might elaborate if additional information is asked of them.
Great. All right, I think we can go ahead and move on.
Perfect. One more clip before we start doing some practice. So final answer is we have offside gaining an advantage because of a rebound.
Beautifully set around the back from New York City.
Retreats to hook that ball in. Awkward bounce there. Still could be a chance. Back for Medina now. His cross into the middle. Collins had a touch. What is going on with Toronto right now?
I'm not sure. I mean, look at this clearance from Omar Gonzalez. It's at his feet, and he goes down. Does he lose his footing? Yeah, okay. He gets caught and tangled up there and just tries to do anything to head it away. Ends up at the feet of...
Yeah, we were a bit jumpy on that one. We didn't see the play by Omar Gonzalez.
Retreats to hook that ball in. Awkward bounce there. Still could be a chance. Back for Medina now. His cross into the middle. Collins had a touch.
Is it still jumping?
That one was a little bit better, yeah. If you could pause at the moment Gonzalez plays the ball on the replay, that would be helpful.
At his feet, and he goes down. Does he lose his footing? Yeah, okay. He
Do it
gets
from
caught
further
and
away.
tangled up there and just tries to do anything to head it away. Ends up at the feet of... from New York City.
Retreat.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah, let me just back up just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So doesn't sound like it was a very clear video, but we can still kind of take where the players are and based on the outcome and kind of get to that decision. So we know this is starting from a free kick. So our free kick actually becomes our kick point. So this is the moment that the ball is being kicked. So when this is happening, what is the snapshot that we have? And if you look, we actually have 2 players in an offside position. It's very clear. Again, somebody mentioned earlier about using the field markings. It's pretty clear that all of the defenders are right along this line for the penalty area line. And we have, so it's very obvious that we have 2 attackers standing in the offside position. So now what's the next step? Now we're looking at what's the outcome of how the ball is being played. So we look at this defender here and what is his action that tells us of how we play this ball. Because now, I mean, the big thing that we're trying to determine is it's whether it's a deliberate play or if it's a deflection. Well, let's look at the distance. This is a very far distance between the free kick and being taken and where the player is who actually ultimately plays the ball. I mean, I'm not really great at distance. I don't know, I'm guessing it's 25, 30. There's plenty of time and distance for this person to make a decision on how they're going to play the ball. How does he play that ball? If you look at his motion, he heads the ball. So he has time to decide that how he wants to jump towards that ball to make a play on the ball. So that tells us whether it's a proactive move or reactive. Because of the distance and how he determines to play this ball, we know it's very proactive. He made a determination based on how he played this ball with his head that now it's very proactive. And so because of those things that we just mentioned, this is very much a deliberate play. So even though the final outcome is that this deliberate ball played by the defender ends up at the feet of an attacker who was in the offside position, because the ball was played in a deliberate manner by the defender, this is not offside. Do we have any questions?
Question here, doesn't him tripping or accidentally falling change anything?
That's a really good question, and that's really going to come to the referee and them having the proximity and being very close to the player to make a determination. But the big thing is we also know that there was a lot of time, there was a lot of distance. If it's a tripping by an opponent, then it becomes a foul, right? But if this person tripped as he's trying to play, then he still made a conscious effort to decide how he was going to play that ball. So it's really going to depend on whether you not think there's a foul or there's no foul.
Yeah, and I want to
emphasize. No he just happened to trip. I would say it's still a deliberate play.
I want to emphasize what Veronica just said here. The quality of the play by the player doesn't matter. It's irrelevant in this one. The fact that he has chosen inexplicably to head the ball that is down by his ankles is not an excuse. He is still doing that deliberately. And so if he has the time to make a decision to play the ball, then it becomes a deliberate play no matter how well he does it. In this case, he stumbles a little bit, sure, but that's because he has decided to head the ball down by his feet. So this is still a deliberate play. We had another question. If the AR is unsure who headed the ball, i.e. the view is obstructed, should they raise the flag?
If they're unsure, they should keep the flag down and try to use the communication system. However, if this is a game where there is no communication system, we're just relying on the flags, the flag mechanics, we would probably wait until this play plays out and say it results in a goal, then the AR would stand to bring the referee over to have that conversation. Because the big question is that there's a huge level of uncertainty. They're not really sure they know that there's somebody who's in offside position who received the ball, but they're just not unsure of how was received, whether it was a deliberate play from a defender or not. So again, it's going to go back to communication between the referee and that AR.
All right, so no more questions there. We're right at 8 o'clock, which is normally when we would conclude for the evening. But given we have a special guest who's teaching tonight, Veronica, do you want to move into a couple of maybe a couple clips for people to do the poll on and just see how we're doing?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So I've kind of explained some of these situations.
From New York City.
So now this time, let's try to get you guys to get more into the practice. And so there's going to be 4 responses that we're going to be looking for. We're looking for when you watch the video, make a determination whether there's no offside, whether there's offside interfering with play, offside interfering with an opponent, or offside gaining an advantage. So again, just like previously, we'll watch the videos about 3 times, and then we're going to take a poll. Make sure you provide your answer, because then it can help you determine on whether or not we need to be, or you need a little bit of maybe more practice on how to align yourself with better familiarization with the offside limits.
Did score a goal that was, yes, he did, as the best of the Under-20 World Cup against the US. Janela and Rossi. Bingham says that's offside. Rossi's not hanging around to argue. And the celebrations tell you that LAFC have 6. I mean, just look at the midfield that they brought on in this second half. Duke's 19, Cifuentes 21, Janela 21. Young, energetic players that fill in the gaps. This ball's hit. Now, is that offside? Well, that looks close. That's what the Galaxy would claim. Right? Because when this ball's hit from Janela here,
Well, if this stands, Rossi has 4 and his team have half a dozen.
I'm not sure, John, because it's where the ball is. That's where
Did score a goal that was regarded as the best of the Under-20 World Cup against the US. Ginella and Rossi. Bingham says that's offside. Rossi's not hanging around to argue.
All right, maybe give us a pause at the moment of truth on this one.
Tell you that LAFC have 6.
I mean, just look at the midfield that they brought on in this second half. Duke's 19, Cifuentes 21, Ginella 21. Young, energetic.
I'm going to go back just a little bit.
It's the next decision we need, right? The ball across the face.
Pretty close.
No, keep going. It's the next pass.
One, yeah.
It's the next pass we need. This one.
There we go.
All right, that gets us our kick point. So now we will launch the poll and let's see what you got. All right, a few more seconds to get your answers in. Okay. And here are our results.
All right, so we basically almost have a third thinking no offside, a third thinking offside interfering with play, and offside, a third thinking offside gaining an advantage. All right, good to see where we're at.
So let's break down why this cannot be gaining an advantage, Veronica.
All right, so the first thing is, there was a considerations clip, or the, with all of the little charts that kind of gave us all the different explanations for gaining an advantage. Did we have a rebound off either an opponent or a post or crossbar? No. Did we have a save from any player here? The answer is no. Did we have any kind of deliberate play or deflection off of anybody? I would say, again, the answer is no. Just we can see the way the ball is played. And so that eliminates gaining an advantage. And so now the big question is going to be whether it's offside, no offside, or it's actually interfering with play. So you can barely see the kick point here. And now if you look at the line, you look at this goal area line, you see this, the teammate who's the attacker, his body is leaning forward. And so we know from the law is any part of the body that can score that is ahead, closer to the goal line than the second last opponent. So in this case, the chest is actually, and even the head is something that can score. So that's ahead of the opponent, of the defender. So now that puts him in an offside position. And if we continue playing this clip,
fill in the gaps. This ball's hit.
Now, is that offside?
Oh, that looks close.
And he receives the ball and plays it and puts it in the back of the net. So final answer for this is actually interfering with play. So it's a very tight decision, but again, it's knowing that there's part of the body that is ahead of the second to last opponent that can actually score, that puts him in an offside position. So offside. But this was a close decision. It was very, very tight decision. And in a game, it really would require 100% concentration of that assistant referee to make sure that they are 100% focused on the position of the attacker and the defender.
Great. I think we can move on to the next one.
All right, so I'm going to skip ahead since we only have a little bit of time. Let's go to video number 3.
It's score a goal that was. Kinda. Russell. Johnny Russell does well, still going forward. It's wonderful skill. Still Johnny Russell. Prodded through. Polito's there. Russell will turn it in. Brilliantly worked. Well, he's been called off when he rasped it into the net from a yard. That's so unlucky.
He's almost off the pitch as he comes back on. He does brilliantly well, doesn't he? Cuts in, balance. Thought he might have picked up a penalty there. Credit him not going down. Thought he might have picked up a penalty there as well. He was off the pitch. Comes back on. Always one. Yeah, you're imploring the referee's assistant to give that one.
Kinda. Russell. Johnny Russell does well, still going forward. It's wonderful skill. Still Johnny Russell. Prodded through. Polito's there. Russell will turn it in. Brilliantly worked. Well, he's been called off when he rasped it into the net from a yard. That's so unlucky.
He's almost off the pitch as he comes back on. He does brilliantly well, doesn't he? Cuts in, balance. Thought he might have picked up a penalty there. Credit him not going down. Thought he might have picked up a penalty there as well. Yeah, he was off the pitch.
Let's get our moment of truth on this one.
Always one. Yeah, you're imploring the referee.
Johnny Russell does well, still going forward. It's wonderful skill. Still Johnny Russell. Prodded through.
Yeah, just fast forward to our moment of truth, Veronica.
Yeah.
We're running out of time.
From a yard when he
He's almost off the pitch as he comes back on. He does brilliantly well, doesn't he? Cuts in, balance. Thought he might have picked up a penalty there. Credit him not going down. Thought he might have picked up a penalty there as well. Yeah, he was off the pitch.
All right, so there's our moment of truth.
That's right. We can't see the ball, but we know it's behind on the other side of number 8. And blue is about to kick it. So that's
right
basically our moment of truth right here.
All right, and then what happens next? The video's a bit hard to pick up, so let's just move it through a little slowly here.
Got it. So plays the ball.
All right, so there we saw it nice and clear, and we'll launch our poll for this one. This is a great clip. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, good.
A few more seconds. All right, and here we go.
Okay, so the majority of you believe that it's getting an advantage, but we do have 4 people who think it's no offside. We have 22 that think it's interfering with play, and we have 3 people that think it's interfering with the opponent. So let's kind of go through some of the other answers and then we'll toy them out. So getting to the moment of truth, which is really where the kick point. So this is when we take our snapshot. So at this moment, is there anybody in the offside position? So as we talked about this briefly in a different clip, we have this player in blue who's behind the goal. So now in terms of offside, we know that his position is on the goal line, so which means that he's actually ahead of the play. So who is our offside line here made by? It's actually going to be the goalkeeper because the defender is actually closer to the goal line. So Yes, we have one player in offside position and we know where the offside line is. So that's number one. We know we have one player in the offside position. So the next thing is now we're looking at the outcome. What happens? So if we play this ball slowly, here's the save. So this first starts with a save. The goalkeeper is directly in front of the goal area and he stops the ball. We continue with this play, and now this ball, it actually ends up rebounding off his own teammate, the defender. So now we have a save, and now we have a rebound, and the ball ends here. Now we have a player who runs back onto the pitch, and he actually kicks the ball and scores, puts the ball in the back of the net. So again, we talked about his position prior. He was in the offside position, and when his teammate played it, he benefited from a save and then the ball that was rebounded, and then he played the ball. So he actually gained an advantage. So somebody mentioned earlier whether it's interfering with play. So it can't be interfering with play because we had these other two elements. We had we had the deflection, or not the deflection, sorry. We had the save and we had the rebound. So it can't be interfering with play. Again, it can't be no offside because this player did start in the offside position. So all of these indicators basically tell us for all these reasons that this is offside, gaining an advantage. Any questions?
All right, any questions on that one? No question. So I think that's a good time for us to come to a close. We're at 8:15. I want to leave ourselves maybe 5 minutes, Veronica, if you don't mind. If anybody has any specific questions they want to ask Veronica, it's a rare opportunity to have a session with a former FIFA referee and a World Cup referee. So if anybody has any non-clip related questions about Veronica's career or experiences she had, we can take a couple of minutes to ask those. Otherwise, we can say thank you to Veronica and call it a night. So if there are any questions, please submit them now. Otherwise, thank you for being here. All right, we had a question.
I do have one point to make. I just remembered. The one thing we do have to be prepared as assistant referees is whenever we have players that are off of the field, or whenever we have the goalkeeper, who in this case was the second to the last opponent, it makes it very, very tricky, because that's not what we're used to calling in an offside. We're usually looking for the defenders to make that offside determination and make that snapshot picture. So one thing I would just say is whenever you have a player off the field, or whenever your goalkeeper is your second to last opponent, that's when as ARs we have to raise our level of concentration, because it's very tricky, because your mind is used to calling things a certain way, and now things don't look quite the same. And so you have to be prepared to make these decisions. So that's the only point I want to make on this.
Awesome. So we had one question. What are some of your favorite moments at the international level?
I would say my ultimate moment was I was very fortunate and honored to work in the fourth place game for the 2011 Women's World Cup. So that was a huge, huge game. And just to be part of a game that mattered, the game that led to a team earning a medal, that was huge, especially because in that final, the 2011 World Cup, we had the US and Japan in the final. And so as number one as referees, we always want our teams to do well and succeed. We want our team to bring home a basically either a gold or the World Cup. And so, which means that if you have your team in the gold in the final, the next best game that you can expect for yourself or want to wish for is the fourth place game. So for me, it was like the ideal situation where we had the US competing for the final and the USA team competing, refereeing, getting that honor to be on the fourth place game.
All right, we had another one. What physical fitness regimen do you expect for high-level referee training?
If you're looking at assistant referees, it's going to be really about speed and agility. It's really what matters, because these players are getting faster. And as an assistant referee, the entire game, there's a lot of sprinting motion to follow the ball, sprinting motion to follow these attackers. These players are getting faster, and so that's the biggest thing. And being able to have the agility to go from one movement to another, to go from sidestep to a sprint, and sprint back to sidestepping. For referees, it's a different kind of a skill set required. Referees, it's much more about having, more, they don't have to be as fast because it's much more about endurance, high intensity. Again, agility is also important, but it's different kinds of movements because the referee has a little bit more control over how they move in a game. They have less of those sudden stops. But fitness is going to be huge for both referees and ARs, because really if they're both in a position to see the play, then they can have more likelihood or an opportunity to make the correct decision. So everything really comes down to positioning and what you say.
Awesome. Another question. How old were you when you started refereeing, and where did you start refereeing?
I started refereeing when I was in Woodland. I was 16 years old. So I started when I was still playing, and I grew up in Woodland. I started mainly in Sacramento, Cherry Island. So was kind of where it was my hometown.
It's where it all started, huh? All right. Yeah. And then we had another question. What is the best way for female referees to reach your level?
It's really going to be doing as many games as you can and doing as many challenging games as possible. I'd say what really helped me hone my skills is making sure that I continue to try to pursue the next level. The amateur game is a really, really good place to kind of gain some skills, just because referees tend to be very challenged. There's a lot of player management. Again, it's also watching a lot of games, being exposed to high-level refereeing. It's going to seeing the Republic. It's going to seeing the Earthquakes. It's seeing that game as well. You have to be a student of the game and watch it to really help you. So it's not just practice and stepping out in the field and practicing when you get there. It's also putting in that practice ahead of time by mentally preparing for the game.
Okay, great. I think that's it then. So I think, okay, one more question. Do you favor the new technological advancements of modern day refereeing, i.e. VAR?
I mean, I think I'm happy that it is another tool to make sure that we're making decisions correct. It's whether we like it or not, that's just kind of part of our new technology. And it's really, if we see the VARs, they're really there to make sure that the referee team is making the correct decision. They're just there to support. Ultimately, we want 100% correct decisions on the field, but they're just there as backup to support the team in case the decision is not made. And what's nice about VAR, whether we like it or not, it's taken away, most of the time, not all the time, a lot of the controversies away. We don't have as many goals that were not awarded in those kind of situations. There's going to be still some learning curve regarding some of the decisions when VARs get involved, but at least there's less of those controversies than there used to be before, and that was a bigger fallacy and a bigger issue to deal with, to have a team, not move on to the next round of games or another game, because a goal that shouldn't have been awarded was awarded, or the other way around.
All right. I think that brings us to a close for our time. I want to thank Veronica for joining us this evening and providing her insight on the always difficult and at times confusing, particularly for us referees in the room, topic of offside. So Veronica, thank you very much. And everybody, we thank you for joining us and wish you all a very good night. Good night, folks.